Welcome to GRC Chat. Today our guest is Aayush. I'm very happy to have you today, Aayush. Welcome.
Thank you, Ajay.
Thank you. So before we jump into our topic for today, can you shortly introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am Ayush. I am one of the co-founders and also the CEO of a GRC automation company called Scrut Automation. We work a lot with small and mid-sized companies, helping them automate their GRC processes with a very special focus on risk management. We've been around for about 3 years, raised 3 rounds of capital. Uh, we we presence across more than 70 countries now. So yeah, that's a quick summary.
Sounds great. So with that, let's get into it. So what are we talking about today?
So one of the important things that we like talking about and also generally evangelizing to the people in the market, if you will, is that most companies today are now incorporating AI in some shape or form or LLM-based use cases in some shape or form into their core customer-facing applications or for applications that are essentially meant for internal use. Now, there is a key component of, how we see this essentially playing out is that AI-based applications or LLM-based applications need to be dependable. And when we talk about dependability, we break it down into two important dimensions. One dimension is are is the are the responses in line with what you expect them to be? Can you can you actually draw meaningful, actionable insights based on the recommendations or the response that is generated from the LLM-based application or interface?
Mhm.
And the other component of dependability is uh, can you trust that your data, your information will be handled responsibly? Uh, and the application will not give out information that it's not supposed to give out, and it will not feed information that it's supposed to feed in. Right? The user will not feed in information that he or she is not supposed to feed in. So I think it would be important to talk about, because there's a lot of content around the first dimension, which is how do you make the response from LLMs uh, more reliable? How do you improve the quality of responses? How do you provide more context to it, either some form of RAG or context engineering, or more recently through MCP? But the second component of it is something that often remains an afterthought when companies, especially early stage companies, are building LLM based applications. And I think that would be something interesting to talk about today.
Mm, Sounds good then. Yeah, so what would be, maybe then some key things regarding this? 'Cause there's a lot to talk about, but
So I think there are two important components of ensuring that you're using LLM responsibly within your applications, especially customer facing applications. The first is uh, taking control of what guardrails you place to make sure that the information that is going out, the information that is coming out of it is it's not, you're not unauthorized to view that information, or the user is not unauthorized to view that information. And the second is when users are plugging in information into the LLMs, do you have data leak measures put in place, right? And so there are some common, uh, more often than not, companies actually don't have to reinvent the wheel around it. I think ISO 42001 and the NIST AI RMF is actually a pretty good starting point for companies to start thinking about LLM security. And the OWASP Foundation more recently has also published the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs, which is essentially if you were to mimic the behavior of an attacker, how would you potentially breach an LLM-based application? Uh, and some of the more common threats that we've seen companies being vulnerable to, especially the smaller and mid-sized companies that are really shipping things at a very high velocity and often overlooking some of these guardrails, are things around prompt injection, things around data leak. Can I actually enter a malicious prompt in a manner where I am prompting the LLM to give me information that I would otherwise not have access to? For example, credit card information or PII, becoming even more true in the case of autonomous agentic actions now, where let's say payments are involved. Can I actually arm twist an LLM through prompt engineering in a manner where it generates an action that it's not authorized to carry out? For example, initiating a payment or initiating a wire or approving a certain purchase order or invoice, for example, right? And these are all things that are pretty commonly covered in the ambit of, say, an ISO 42001 or a NIST AI RMF. We help a lot of companies navigate these frameworks through a combination of automation and some degree of uh, forward deployed infosec analysts that work with our customers to to surface some of these findings. But I think these are important components of how companies should start thinking about LLM security, and think about it at a design level. Think about it when their applications are still early. We in fact recommend a lot of companies to start thinking about it even before these applications actually start hitting more customer facing or user facing use
Mhm.
cases in production. But I mean, the sooner the better.
Sounds good. So there are actually a lot of details, I think, for into, like for companies to pay attention to more than maybe they are initially, like overlooking. So with that being the case, with that much things to consider, what would be some, like takeaway points for, companies or, people that is involved with these processes to start implementing or at least like prioritize? Like, when they just, go to work tomorrow, they're like, oh, let's start implementing these. What would those like most important things would be?
I think and again, I will share what we've observed from a business to business context, or an enterprise context, really. Uh, so uh, two three things. One is, people are one of the most vulnerable points in the entire journey. So the way organizations can ensure that uh, the users within the company are not leaking sensitive information to LLMs like ChatGPT, or the applications that they sell to their end customers are not allowing sensitive information to be fed into the prompts. Uh, they should implement data leak prevention measures from the get go, which means that there should be an auto selection every time there is a sensitive information like a PII or a PHI or a card holder information being fed into uh, the interface through which a user would engage with the LLM. They should get flagged at the very entry point, both for internal and customer facing applications. So that's one guardrail that companies should think about placing. The other important guardrail that companies should think about uh, placing are access control guardrails. So the older methods of access control really focused on how do I govern access to databases and other sources of information. But this is becoming increasingly relevant in the age of agents, where certain actions will be autonomously carried out by agents. So how do you ensure that the agents are not overprivileged, or they're not manipulated by the user to become overprivileged? Even if the agents are relying on certain sources of information for context, certain documents, certain databases, the user that is triggering those agents will have certain access privileges, and the agent should not be any more overprivileged as compared to the user. And there are ways to ensure those guardrails are in place. And the third uh, thing that I would suggest companies to think about is, as I mentioned earlier, ISO 42001 and NIST AI RMF are great starting points. The EU AI Act is also a great starting point, which allows you to not have to reinvent the wheel and gives you a starting framework that comes in very handy for you to really start thinking about how do you incorporate some of these design elements that I spoke about, right I mean, even before the production stage. It gives you a framework to keep yourself organized and build a set of controls that you can hold yourself accountable to. Sure, the same set of controls will probably demand more automation, more in-depth implementation as the companies grow. But it is very useful to start thinking about these from a very early stage. And I think the ISO 42001 and NIST AI RMF framework and the OWASP top 10 for LLMs actually provide a great framework for people to get started with.
Thank you. And with that, that was actually all of my questions. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think this is it.
Okay, excellent. So with that, Ayush, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. And it was a pleasure to have you as a guest.
All right. Thank you.